Welcome to more. Mortgage Underwriting 101. The Essentials. Brought to you by Campus Mortgage. Before we get started, let's review the disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this course are those of the instructor and do not necessarily reflect any official campus mortgage policy or position. Examples of analysis performed within the course content are only examples. They should not be utilized in real-world application as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within the analysis are not reflected of the position of campus mortgage. Nothing contained in this course should be considered legal advice. Due to ongoing changes to the mortgage regulations and guidelines, the information presented in the webinars, as well as the course materials downloaded as PDF files, is time sensitive and is subject to change without notice. This training is based solely on agency guidelines. Each investor and/or lender may have additional overlays. which you need to be aware of. In 2018, Campus Mortgage, all rights reserved without the prior written permission of Campus Mortgage. No part of this work may be used, reproduced, or transmitted in any form. Let's go over a few items, topics that what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to go over mortgage terminology, different loan programs, the loan stacking order, the mortgage roles, the loan originators, the loan file flow, the 4 C's of underwriting. I did add a reference guide section and a practice quiz to go over the material that we just went over in this presentation. So let's get started with the mortgage terminology. So first, we have to learn what is a mortgage. A mortgage is a written consent between the mortgager, which is the borrower, and the mortgagee, which is the lender, that requires the mortgager to pledge their home as an asset for repayment of the loan. So just briefly summarize what a mortgage is. It's a promissory note. It's kind of like a legal IOU that's telling you, the borrower who's wanting the loan, telling the lender that I will promise to pay you set on these terms, where it could be a 30-year mortgage term, a 15-year, at a certain rate, and the payment is due by a certain time. Typically, it's the first of every month, and it's a promissory. So if they don't pay for that, the consequences are that they will have to get foreclosed upon, and the house will be taken away from them. That's why it's a collateral. So let's go over the different type of mortgage loans, basically, how they're securitized. First is the first mortgage. It's pretty simple. It's the mortgage that is the first lien for repayment from the sale or foreclosure of a secured property. I'm just going to go briefly into a sale because in today's market, there's two types of sales. One is traditional sale, where you want to sell your house, whatever you get for it, as long as it's more than what you owe, it's fine. And then there's another type of sale which you might hear about, which is a short sale, where the seller states that the house is worth less than what they owe, and they're asking the bank to take less for their loan. And you need an agreement from the bank saying, okay, I will accept X amount of dollars in repayment of the loan that we gave you. The next thing is subordinate liens. And those are any additional liens that are paid after the first mortgage is satisfied. Okay, I'm going to touch bases with that in a little bit. The next one is close-end second mortgage, and that is subordination lien with an initial balance that is paid over the course of a loan term. So a close-end second mortgage is basically saying it's just like the first mortgage, but there's another loan ahead of the line for repayment. So you have the first mortgage and then you have a second mortgage. It's usually very similar terms as the first mortgage. There's a set years that they have to repay back. The interest rate is set. It could be a variable interest rate if the borrower chooses to. And there's a due date, of course, of when you're supposed to pay. A subordinate liens is a term used for when there's two mortgages. I'm going to give a short example. If you are two people on the same line and they're wanting the same stuff, they're wanting let's say a burger, and they're on that line, they both order the burger. The chef, the cook in the back, this makes the first burger, then finds out, hey, there's no second burger. Now, who's going to get that first burger? Well, of course, the first person who placed that order. And that first person is representing the first mortgage. The second person is representing the second mortgage. Now, he already placed the order, he paid for it, but there's no burger now. So he's stuck with, hey, nothing. Or, he could go and reorder something. But typically on a mortgage term, if there is a foreclosure sale and there's not enough money to cover the second mortgage, the second mortgage lender is stuck with whatever they are given. So an example, dollar-wise example, if you're selling a home and it's being sold for, let's say, $200,000, and you owe $200,000 on the loan, well, there's enough money to cover the first and second mortgage. And in another scenario, if you owe $200,000, but the home is being sold for $150,000, the first mortgage is $100,000. That's going to be paid 100%, and the second loan, which is another $100,000, will now only get $50,000 because there's no more money left when they sell that property. So I'm going to go over into some examples a little later, so you can visually see what I'm talking about. Home equity line of credit, which is a HELOC, that is considered a second mortgage also, and the same rules apply to that. And that is basically, it kind of works like a credit card. The borrower gets a set limit on what they could take out on the HELOC. Let's say it's $100,000, and if they don't need all that money up front, and they only need $10,000, they only take $10,000, and they pay on that $10,000. They don't pay on the full amount that they borrowed, just like your credit card. Borrower and co-borrower, the individuals who will become obligated on the mortgage once the closing docs have been executed. If you are working on a file that has a married couple and you have two separate applications, that's incorrect. Married couples has to be on the same 1003, and that's where the clarification of borrower and co-borrower comes into place. because they're on the same application. Typically, the one who earns the most money on a monthly basis would be considered primary borrower, and the other one would be co-borrower status. If you are working on a file that has another type of relationship, mother and daughter, father and son, two best friends, two acquaintances, two business partners, whatever scenario, and then not married, they do have to be on their own separate 1003, and each person is considered a borrower. Okay, so the co-borrower is only coming into place when getting a 1003 and they are married. So just one last tidbit: if you are working on a file, two best friends, but there's three people on the loan, one of the best friend is married and that's the other person on the loan, they would be on a 1003 together, and the single person or the married person, but only one person going alone, would be on their own 1003 only. The next one is a buyer and a seller. Pretty simple, especially for a purchase transaction. The buyer is a party that is purchasing the home, indicated on the sale of the contract. The seller is selling the home to the buyer, and it must be vested owner of the property on title. So the key word in that would get a lot of people confused is vested owner. What does that mean? They physically own the property. They don't have like a co-owner signership of selling the house. Let's say if I'm the owner, but I'm like, someone else approached me and said, I'll sell your house for you, and then the contract is under that other person's name. It's not really true, because I'm the rightful owner. I should be on that contract because my name is on the deed and the title of the property. So let's go over some more terminology. Credit risk. And we're going to go into really on how do we qualify for a borrower? What's the qualifications? What are the key things we're going to be looking at when we're determining if the loan is approved, or is it officially declined, or this needs to be more clarification? The first thing is credit risk. The inherent risks in a lender based on the borrower's previous credit performance, debt to income ratio, LTV, marketability of collateral, which is how much is the house is worth, and other factors. Right now, we're just talking about the credit portion on credit performance. So the next thing is FICO scores. You kind of all hear it. We see TV commercials on different companies that are going to improve it or check your credit. It's basically a score, and it's verified with the Tri-Merge credit report. So it's a rating system that these three companies, and I'll go into what a Tri-Merge credit report, which is a history trade lines between all three credit bureaus, which is Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. All these companies have a rating on how they're going to judge you based on how you pay your credit cards, what's your balances versus what's your limits, how much debt you currently have based on what's the income that you have expressed when you applied for the credit. All that can take consideration, and it comes out with a credit score. Typically, you have good, excellent, fair, poor credit, but they're in numbers. Those are just what ranked in words and in sections of numbers. So let's go into right now. I'm just going to show you what a credit report looks like and what we as underwriters should be looking on that credit report to help determine the eligibility of that loan. Okay, so I'm going to go into the sample credit in the sample handouts section. And on the top left, it says First American Credco. Each lender that you're going to be working for will have their own credit company that they utilize to run these credit reports. The name usually is on the left or in the middle somewhere. All this information here, and I'm going to repeat this throughout the course. Our jobs are due diligence. We have to make sure everything is correct, what we do. And sometimes we have to make sure the information that we get prior to us is correct also. A lot of mistakes that I see is human error, which is typing the numbers wrong in for the social, typing, especially for the credit report. I'm going to go, I just came across one of my coworkers. They went all the way to closing, and they caught it just before doing the closing docs that the borrower's social security number is incorrect. Didn't match the social security card that was given. So the credit report that was ran was incorrect. The criteria to give the borrower the loan is not correct, because now the credit scores were a little lower, and in this case, I don't think it jeopardized him tremendously of not getting the loan, but there was other factors that came into play. So again, one thing to take away from this training is to make sure you are doing your job and checking all the information that you receive from the borrower, from your loan officer, your processor, what you do on your side, and make sure it's all accurate. That's our job. All right, so this gives you the breakdown. It tells you the scores. What's the FICO score? This is 536. It is on the lower end, and it tells you why sometimes it's low. Delinquencies, too much credit, too many inquiries. So this person has a mortgage. It tells you the mortgage history. This has a home equity loan. A home equity loan is a second mortgage. It's another terminology that's considered a second. They've never been late on it. If they were late, it would be on here, on this section. They have credit cards. Another tidbit is on auto loans. You want to make sure if it's an auto loan or a lease, because that will determine your debts. If it's an auto loan and it's 10 payments or less, you could exclude the car payment from your ratios. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, we're going to go into that shortly. And if it's a lease, you cannot exclude it, and you have to include it into your ratios. And I've seen it, processors, even underwriters accidentally, when they look at it to the loan system that the credit report imports to, they just see the car, it's showing up as incorrect as an auto loan, not a lease, and they're excluding the payment, and it's making loans that should not qualify, and it's going to hurt the borrower down the road. Okay, so go all the way down. There's a derogatory section. This section tells you on all the lates, how many days, how many, when are those lates, and what type of loan it is. So this is a mortgage. This is the first mortgage. Remember, I told you up on top was the second mortgage. This is primary. There's a lot of lates on here, so you have to check when the lates were. Check your guidelines, see if they're acceptable, those lates. All right, let's continue on with the presentation. Okay. Let's go over mortgage terminology. Loan to value. The relationship between the first mortgage loan amount and the lower of the appraised value of the purchase price or the subject property as expressed in a percentage. The combined loan to value, which is also abbreviated sometimes CLTV. The relationship between the first mortgage loan amount plus the balance on the subordinate financing and the lower of the appraised value or the purchase price. The next thing is high CLTV, which is high combined loan to value. And that's the relationship between the first mortgage plus the credit limit. And that's what the max that they could borrow on a HELOC, on a line of credit, and the lower of the appraised value and the subject property. All right. Let's go into a short worksheet to help you understand what we just went over. So the first part is LTV. That's one of the simplest calculations to do. You take the loan amount divided by the appraised value or the purchase price. And I'm going to touch what that means, appraised value or purchase price, because that's on all three of these. That's going to be either, you have to take the lower of the two. So if the house is appraised at $300,000 and the purchase price is only $250,000, you will be utilizing the $250,000 purchase price and not the $300,000. Because again, the lender, the bank, only wants to lend on what the borrower is acquiring on a purchase price. If it's higher, that's always a benefit to the buyer. Another thing is if the house comes in less than the purchase price, well, the bank is only going to give you the loan based off of the lower of the two, and that's going to be the appraised value. So typically the difference, and you'll see an example down the road, if that happens, the borrower does have to come up with the difference out of his own funds, and it can't be financed, that portion. Okay, so let's go back to the LTV. Its LTV is the $150,000 loan amount divided by the $250,000 appraised value, and you get 60%. The CLTV is, again, the $150,000 loan amount plus a second loan balance. So for this example, let's say the borrower does have a HELOC and it is $60,000 HELOC, and he already used $50,000. You're going to do the $50,000 plus the $150 divided by the $250, which is the appraised value, and that equals 80%. And the HCLTV, simple enough, it just takes the loan amount again. Always use the loan amount of the first mortgage plus the max limit that the borrower can borrow on that HELOC, which is $60,000 on this one, divided by the $250,000, and that equals 84%. All right, let's do another practice. If you have a purchase price of $250,000, an appraised value at $275,000, and then you have a loan amount of $175,000, a balance on a HELOC of $50,000, and an $80,000 credit limit on the HELOC. All right, it seems a little complicated, this one, but we could all get through it. We are going to do the first question. What property value should we use to calculate the LTV? I'm going to give you guys all a hint. It's going to be the lower of the appraised value or the purchase price. Okay, based on that hint, the answer is $250,000 because the purchase price is lower than the appraised value. Let's calculate the LTV. You should have an answer of 70%. Now, how do we come up with that? Well, you take the $250,000. That's going to be your purchase price. That's the lower of the two, and you're going to take the $175,000 loan amount, divide that over into the $250,000, and that equals 70%. All right. Now, it should be getting a little easier because we did one round of these already. Calculate the CLTV. And the answer you should get is 90%. The CLTV is taking the 175 plus the 50, add them up together, and divide it into the 250 purchase price. Now let's do the last calculation. Calculate the HCLTV, which is the loan amount of 175 and the 80,000 credit limit. Add them up and then divide it into the 250. And your answer is 102. Okay. So below are the way that it'll read up on your loan system. It'll say 70% LTV, 90% CLTV, 102 HCLTV, which I kind of would be worried about that only because, a lot of the guidelines right now don't let you go up that high in the HCLTV scenario. But again, you always have to follow your guidelines and your investor guide. Just now, the debt to income ratio calculations, what makes it up. First, we have to understand what PITIA stands for, and that's the principal, interest, taxes, Homeowners insurance, mortgage insurance, home association dues. These are all broken down on a monthly basis. It's basically the first one and the second one, which is principal and interest, and is basically what the borrower is paying back on the loan. How much is that going towards the balance, and how much is going towards the interest to the lender. The next one is taxes and homeowners insurance, which is required to have. Not required to have, but required to pay to someone. You have to have a homeowners insurance and you have to pay taxes. The next two, mortgage insurance and home association, it might not be on every loan that you work on. Mortgage insurance is only given to the borrower if they're taking a loan greater on the primary first mortgage than 80%. So if they're taking a loan for 90%, one big loan for 90% LTV, you will have mortgage insurance. If they're taking one loan that's 80% or less, no mortgage insurance required. If they're taking two loans out, a first and a second, and the CLTV is 90 and the LTV is 80, no mortgage insurance required also. Homeowner association dues you typically will be given if you're having a condo, a co-op, a PUD. Those all have dues or maintenance dues that you have to pay on a monthly basis. Just we'll go back one more thing on mortgage insurance. If you're having an FHA loan, you do have mortgage insurance on it all the time. So what is the housing ratios? So you might hear that. You might hear also a front-end DTI, and that's the PITIA divided by the total qualifying income that you determine what the borrower is earning on a monthly basis. The next one is the total DTI, and also people will refer that to you as the back-end ratios. And that's going to determine the total debts. Total debts include the PITIA, installment loans. So any car loans, any type of loan that you have to pay back. And this is showing up on your credit report and might show up somewhere on a pay stub or somewhere. Revolving accounts and student loans. Revolving accounts are credit cards. And then you divide that by your total qualifying income. So this is a little practice. So on the left side of the chart, we have the breakdown on the monthly payment for the mortgage. On the right side, we have the breakdown of the total debts broken down in different categories, and the total qualifying income that we on a pay stub or somewhere. Revolving accounts and student loans. Revolving accounts are credit cards, and then you divide that by your total qualifying income. So this is a little practice. So on the left side of the chart, we have the breakdown on the monthly payment for the mortgage. On the right side, we have the breakdown of the total debts broken down in different categories, and the total qualifying income that we're giving to the borrower. So let's answer the first question. What is the PITIA? Now remember, that's basically everything to the left. There's no exemptions because everything is required on this loan that we're working on because it's presented to us. Okay, it's $1,342.50. So we're taking let's use my pen. We're taking this, adding this up, and that's the number we're getting. What are the total all other debts? Okay. Hopefully you got that. It's $900. Right? So let's change this to highlight. We're taking the child support, the $50 monthly revolving debt, the auto loan, and the student loans, adding them up, and that's how we get $900. Calculate the housing ratio. Well, my ratio is a 29 29.83 to be exact. And how do we get up to that? We're taking all these and then we're dividing it into this. And that's how we get the 29. Calculate the total ratio. Okay? The key word is total. So we're taking the bigger picture. So we're taking all of this now, adding them all up, and then we're dividing it into the 4,500. So I hope you got this answer, which is 49.83% DTI. All right, let's go into some more terminology. Purchase transactions allow a borrower to obtain funds for the acquisition of a new property. A purchase agreement, which is a contract between the seller and the buyer that outline the terms of the purchase, includes, definitely have to have on the contract of sale, the property address, all parties' names, so the seller and the buyer, whoever is going to be on this transaction, has to be listed on the contract, your sales price, any deposits that might have been given at the time of the signing of the contract. Typically, they call it earnest money, and it could be a form of a check, a money order, a wire transfer. Typically at that point of the transaction, it's given to the seller's realtor or seller's attorney, and then they hold it up into an escrow account, and then it's being deposited into the title company at the time of closing. You have any seller contributions, that's towards closing costs. And then you have expected date of sales contract of when it's going to close. They're going to have 2 dates on the contract. When is the mortgage commitment has to be issued, and when the loan has to close. And that's important because as an underwriter, we need to meet and keep those expectations, especially if it's in our power, in order to keep them. And then any repairs prior to closing. So that might be, there's a hole in the wall. The borrower is asking them, hey, can you repair it? The seller agrees in that case, and the seller will fix it just before closing. Okay. So let's go over the down payment now. So down payment is the difference between the purchase price or the loan payoff and the new loan amount. Closing costs and prepaid items, that's the cost incurred to purchase a real estate property. Cash to close, cash that is required to meet the down payment and closing costs. You have the escrow account, and that's a deposit account maintained by the lender and funded by the borrower. The account is used to distribute property taxes and homeowners insurance payments. And that's really that's a basically a savings account that's under the borrower's name, that every single month your taxes and insurance, if your escrow, gets put in there. And when the taxes are due on a quarterly basis, and when the homeowners insurance on a yearly basis are due, the lender takes the money out from that account to pay for those dues, the taxes and the insurance. Okay. The next one is lender credit. That's a promotional or a credit from the lender to the borrower. It has to be listed on the closing disclosure and the details of the transaction. It can't be given. The lender credit is not cash that's given to the borrower. It's actually a paper trail on the proper documents. IPC, which stands for interest party contributions, is a credit given to the borrower from the seller of the property to help meet the required closing costs. Then you also have a seller concession, which is the IPCS, that take the form of a non-realty items. So they include sometimes, when it says cash, they can never give them physical cash on a loan. It's also used as credit towards like closing costs, furniture, automobiles, decor allowances. So let's say the blinds, the seller has blinds and the buyer wants to keep them. that's a concession. They're going to give that to them. Moving costs, any type of giveaways that hey, I'm going to give you the bed of the property. Whatever that type of is, you always have to make sure that it does not meet the concession fixed percentage / dollar amount that's allowed by Fannie Mae limits. Also, Freddie Mac has their limits. Also, FHA has their limits. They all have limits of what the borrower could exceed for a seller concession based on the type of loan that you're doing. The earnest money, those are funds given to the seller's realtor or attorney from the buyer. And it's usually at the time of the sales of the contract. You would typically get a check, or sometimes you might get a money order, and all those evidence, we have to provide evidence that those funds definitely came from the borrower and it came from the borrower's accounts. It can't be true cash in their hands. That's why we need sourcing of that check. Okay? And at the end of the day, whatever money is given to the seller's attorney or seller's realtor would be given to the title company for closing, and those funds would be used for the down payment of the property. So let's do a quick example. You have $250 purchase price, $200,000 loan amount, $7,500 closing costs, $1,000 EMD, $3,000 IPCs. That's the figures. Now calculate the down payment. Okay. Down payment would be $50,000. How do we get that? You got a purchase price of $250 and a loan amount of $200,000. So we are, as a lender, only giving him $200,000 of the purchase price. The rest, the borrower does have to come up for his down payment. Calculating the cash to close before credits, and that's $57,500. Wow, where are we getting these numbers? Well, let's see if we could utilize my pen. So we have the purchase price here, and then we have the loan amount, and we have our closing costs. But remember, the borrower has put $50,000. So if you got $50K, and then this $7,500, add them up together, you're $57,500. Calculate the total credits. Total credit is $4,000. Well, why is $4,000? Well, you have $1,000 earnest money that was given early on in the transaction, and then you have a $3,000 basically seller concession. Add them up together, that's $4,000. That's going to be a credit towards the loan. Calculate the cash to close after credits. $53,500. So you take the $57,500, the total cash that needs to close, minus the $4,000 credit. That's how we come up with the $53,500. So what's the different types of loans? It's a refinance, and that's basically a transaction. It's a loan that you basically taking out to pay the existing loan off. Typically, people do that to get a lower interest rate, and that's called a rate and term, or limited cash out refinance, and that's used to pay off any second mortgages that was taken out at the first time of the loan when you purchased the property. Or you also have a cash out refi, and that's basically taking equity of the house, paying off your HELOC maybe, and getting some cash in your hand. Okay. You will have a payoff statement, and that's a statement from the existing mortgage company to disclose the amount or what's owed to them and paid in full on what date and time. So you order a payoff when you're trying to do a refinance, and the payoff from the lender will tell you, you owe me $300,000 if you pay by September 20th. 2019. And if you pay after that, the payoff will be changed, and you have to get a new payoff because the numbers could be a little lower based because if the borrower paid on it, could be a little higher if the borrower didn't pay on it and just has interest for the following month that didn't pay. So let's do a quick exercise. 300,000 loan amount, 250,000 first mortgage payoff. You have 45,000 non-purchase money, and that's the second mortgage. And you have 6,000 closing costs and prepaid items. Okay, prepaid items are basically items like your escrow account. Those are prepaid. Is the borrower getting back cash in this transaction? Nope. Why is that? Because they are paying off a first and a second, and the first mortgage is 250, and they're just paying off the second non-purchase money. So no cash in here. Would this be defined as what type of rate and term or cash out? It's a cash out refi because the second mortgage is not a mortgage that was taken out for a purchasing of the property. That mortgage was taken out for maybe consolidating credit cards or any type of home improvements. So that's not considered a purchase money loan, and that would be considered cash out. Calculate the cash to close. So you get 1,000. Well, why do we get that? It's, basically your closing costs, which the borrower is paying to do the loan, is 6,000. But if you add the first mortgage, second mortgage, and the 6,000, well, that's going to give you more than what the loan amount is covered. So the borrower does have to bring $1,000 in hand, and that's basically coming from their checking account or savings account to cover the closing costs. The loan programs. Okay. You got a conventional loan underwrite to Fannie Mae guidelines or Freddie Mac guidelines. The loan is conforming when the loan amount meets Fannie or Freddie loan amount limits of the subject property's county. Okay. You also have, we talked about PMI, that's private mortgage insurance. Insurance that protects the lender in when the borrower defaults on their loan. This is placed on conventional loans with LTVs exceeding 80%. Okay, so private mortgage insurance is not insurance that helps the borrower, unlike the regular homeowner insurance. Regular homeowner insurance, if something happens, let's say a tornado happens and the house gets destroyed, homeowner insurance covers the cost of rebuilding and get that person back to where the house was originally at. Private mortgage insurance helps the lenders recoup some of their costs associated with doing the loan if the borrower defaults on the loan. And that's the key word, defaults. If the borrower never defaults, private mortgage insurance is never needed for the lender to utilize, but you still pay on it because it's an insurance. It's like gambling. There's a chance that they might need it, but when you go over 80%, lenders require the borrowers to get it. Okay, loan programs. All right, so you got USDA, Rural Housing Development. All right, that's a government mortgage insurance program target borrowers seeking home ownership in rural areas. And it has to be designated. So not all rural areas will qualify for this program. And you have to have a certain qualifying income to get the program. Then you have FHA, which is a government mortgage insurance program that allows borrowers to achieve home ownership with lower down payments and less stringent on credit guidelines than conventional loans. The VA is a government mortgage insurance program for veterans of the United States Air Force. All right, let's go over the loan stacking order right now. The loan stacking order is going to change based on your company that you work for. This is just a generalized stacking order that should be in any file. It's no incorrect order. Like I said, it's based on the company you're working for. So the first thing is executed disclosures and also a 1003 executed. We need that to make sure that the loan is ready to go, that the borrower does want to proceed forward with the loan. And that gives us the thumbs up, the green light to proceed. We also have the 1008. The 1008 shows us gives us our note section. Basically, it's a loan summary of the loan. You have the AUS, which is the automated system. You have a credit report, any supplements, any explanations, which is LOEs, your payoff statements, written VOEs, pay stubs, W-2s, those are all income. Tax returns, IRS transcripts, also income. Bank statements, earnest money, evidence of large deposits, that is also assets. You have your purchase agreement, which is always a must also. You have your flood cert. You want to make sure the property is not in a flood zone, or if it is in a flood zone, you're going to need flood insurance. So those are all important. The appraised value, that comes in an appraisal report that tells you what the home is worth. Then you need the title commitment, tax certification, homeowners insurance, which is the hazard insurance, flood insurance if it's required, wire instructions, survey, title, chain of title, tax certs, closing protection letters. These are all things that you need in the file. You personally, as an underwriter, might not come across some of the title stuff. Each company that I've always worked at gives the underwriters different authority on what to do, what they want them to do. I've been at companies and they tell you, don't touch anything with the title. We'll have our title company to give you the thumbs up if there's anything wrong with it based on our guidelines and criteria, and you could proceed forward. So again, check with your company on what is their stacking order and what's your obligations when it comes to title, who orders the appraisal, who orders the flood certs. These are all things you have to figure out when you get hired, or if you're currently working on what do you have to, what's your function in that company. Okay. Mortgage roles. It's pretty straightforward. A loan officer, that's the person that originates the loan. Basically, they contact the borrower and finds the willingness or the need to do a loan with us. And loan officer usually takes on the application. Most of the time discloses the initial disclosing package to the borrower. And then once they get all that in, then they pass it off to the next person, which is the loan processor. And they coordinate with the loan officer and the borrower to obtain all the required information information to meet the program guidelines for us. So they're actually the loan officer's helper and actually our helper. Always be nice to your loan processor. They are working with you, not against you. Okay. And then it comes to mortgage underwriter, us. We review the files, documentation, and determine whether it meets loan program guidelines. And then we issue a loan decision if the loan is approved, suspended, or declined. That's typically the three major loan decisions. Some companies might have a different variation. So again, check with your company. Then you have the loan closer. And those are people that once you approve your loan, it goes to the loan closers. So if you decline it, it won't go to the loan closure. Approve will. And they coordinate with the title company to schedule the loan closing. They'll draft off the closing disclosures, any final packages for signing at the closing table. Okay. What types of loan originators? You have a broker, and they originate the loan to sell. The loan is pledged to another investor and closes in that investor's name. So the broker is kind of like the middleman from the bank and the borrower. They get the borrower, and then they get the bank, and it's kind of like performing a marriage. They will utilize those two people and work on the loan. Correspondent, the lender closes the loan in their name using the correspondent's line of credit. The loan is sold to the investor after funding. And then you have the seller. Closes the loan in their name and services the loan initially and may sell the loan to an investor at a later time. Most of the companies I've worked at typically are the sellers. We close the loan under our name. We make sure it fits all the criteria and the guidelines. And then down the road, either the loan gets sold to another investor, and either some companies I worked at keeps the loan for servicing, but sells the loan itself. Okay, loan flow. So you get the initial application from the loan officer and disclosures. Goes to the supporting staff, which is the loan officer. They review the file, makes it all ready for underwriting. Then it goes into underwriting. And then we initially underwrite the loan. We'll add conditions to it, and we'll do maybe a commitment or a conditional approval. And then it goes into conditions reviewed. Once they get all those conditions we did issue back, then it goes to clear to close, and the loan processor and underwriter gets it ready for the closing department, and then they close it with the title company. Pretty straightforward. The 4 C's of underwriting. And so you got credit. It's the credit history. We review the credit, make sure it is adequate and meets the guidelines of the program that we're putting into. The next one is capacity. Okay. And that's the ability to repay back the loan. And we evaluate them if they could basically qualify with the debt that they currently have and the future debt that maybe we'll be giving them in qualifying to repay back the loan. Cash. Whenever you see cash, it's sometimes not necessarily means cash in hand, like, the paper cash. It's just cash what the borrower has in their bank account. So we want to make sure the borrower has funds enough to close on the transaction in their bank account, and they are able to do what they're telling us to do. So if they're telling us they're going to put $50,000 down, we need to make sure they have $50,000 somewhere in their bank statement, savings account, IRA, money market account, any accounts that they could have cash if they need to pull out funds there to close. That's what we need. And then we got collateral. It's the subject property, and we evaluate the market value of the property, and we do that through an appraisal. And appraisal tells us it through a third-party person. We call them the appraiser, and they go out and they assess the property, make sure what is the property condition, and based on the property condition and the areas around it, what is the market value on the property. So if it needs to get sold today, what's a good value to give to the property? All right, there's some reference guides. I put these here. You'll find the guidelines on these websites, the Fannie Mae, the Freddie Mac. I did VA if you guys want to learn about VA, and the FHA. Utilize these websites. Make sure you go there on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, because everything is changing. One guideline that's here today might change next week. So make sure your guidelines are up to date. All right, guys. We are gearing towards the end of this presentation. And like I said early on, we're going to do a quick practice quiz to test your knowledge, to see if you retained a lot of the stuff we talked about. And if you didn't, it kind of gives you a point of reference of maybe going back and re-looking at what maybe you didn't understand. But hopefully you guys understand everything. So the first question, what does PITIA stand for? Now this is a big one. We do have to really understand what this one is, because we do our calculations off of this. All right, the answer is principal, interest, taxes, homeowners insurance, and again, mortgage insurance if it requires, and homeowners association dues if it requires. Question 2. What are the 3 credit bureaus that make up a tri-merge credit report? Okay, the answer is Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Question 3. This one is a true and false. A seller concession can't be any dollar amount. Okay. Answer is false. Now, we never really talked about a dollar amount is a max, but we did discuss that there are limits, and the limits are set on percentages based on your loan amount. And you do have to check on the program you're doing, what type of property the loan is, and the program you're doing. So FHA, conventional, which is Fannie and Freddie, and VA, and USDA all have guidelines that talk about their max seller concessions on their programs. So it's something you have to check on when you get a seller concession. You have to figure out, does it meet the guidelines? What is the cashier's check / money order that is given to the seller, realtor, or attorney at the time of the sales contract is signed? Okay. So in normal terminology, people might say, well, what is the cash that is given to the seller's realtor, attorney at the time of the sales contract? What is that called? The answer is earnest money. All right. Terminology, people will say, what's the cash? But we know as underwriters that they can't physically give cash to the seller for purchasing. We have to source the money, and sourcing the money is typically through a cashier's check, a personal check, a money order that we could source on where that money came from. A cash, we don't know where the money came from. That's why we can't use it. Question 5. What type of refinance is it when the borrower only pays off the current mortgage? Okay, hopefully you guys all got this one right. The answer is rate and term. Question 6. What loan program is geared towards veterans of the United States? Okay. So this loan helps out people who serve in the military, to get a mortgage. Okay, if you guys all said this one, VA, you got it correct. Question 7, true or false? The loan closer issues the clear to close and then drafts the closing disclosure and the final package for the borrower to sign at closing. Do they do this? Or maybe it's the underwriter that does this. What do you think? Who does this? True or false? Does the loan closer do this? The answer is false. Okay? You might think that the loan closer issues the clear to close and then drafts the closing disclosures. Well, it's a question that you have to understand and read clearly. The loan closer issues the clear to close. That's the red flag. No, they don't. They don't do that. Who issues the clear to close? Who has the authority to do that? It's the underwriters. The part 2 of that, and then drafts the closing disclosures. Well, underwriters don't do that. It's the loan closer. So it's kind of like a trick question, but hopefully you guys got this all correct. So far you got 100 going on to question 8. Let's continue this streak. Question 8. A blank originates a loan and pledges the loan to an investor and closes it in their name. Okay. We're looking at the type of lender in this question. I'm giving you a hint, okay? And the answer is broker. Okay. If you guys answered, trying to do like a loan officer, the correct answer is broker. Okay, because they're the one that originates a loan from the borrower and then pledges it to sell it to an investor right away. What is the PI/TIA amount from the chart below? Okay, and I'm going to go, once we get all the answers, I'm going to just go over quickly on how we come up with that figure so you know how to do it on your own. Okay, the answer is $1,342.50. Now, how do we get that? Okay, let's use my pen again. We're good to go. We're adding all these up. And that's what makes up the PI/TIA. Okay? So we're not calculating anything here for the PI/TIA. Okay, last question. It's an easy one, I hope you guys all think. If the borrower is buying a home at a purchase price of $400,000 and they are putting down 20%, how much is the down payment in dollars? Okay. All right, last question, last answer. Did you get it right? The answer is $80,000. It's a good chunk down payment. All right. Hopefully, guys and girls, hopefully everyone got 100% on this one. All right. If you have any questions pertaining to the subject matter that we went over, please email them to questions@campusmortgage.org. I look forward to seeing you guys in other presentations, and have a great day. Welcome to Mortgage Underwriting 101, The Essentials, brought to you by Campus Mortgage. Let's go over the disclaimer first. The views and opinions expressed in this course are those of the instructor and do not necessarily reflect any official campus mortgage policy or position. Examples of analysis performed within the course content are only examples. They should not be utilized in real-world application, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within the analysis are not reflected of the position of campus mortgage. Nothing contained in this course should be considered legal advice. Due to ongoing changes to mortgage regulations and guidelines, the information presented in the webinars, as well as course materials downloaded as PDF files, is time sensitive and subject to change without notice. This training is based solely on agency guidelines. Each investor and or lender may have additional overlays which you need to be aware of. In 2019, Campus Mortgage, all rights reserved without the prior written permission of Campus Mortgage. No part of this work may be used, reproduced, or transmitted in any form. Let's go over the materials that we're going to be discussing today. We're going to go over the underwriting duties, underwriter responsibilities, underwriter skill sets, underwriting authorities, underwriting tools, going over agency guidelines, going over the automated versus manual underwrites, AUS findings, go over the Form 1003 and 1008, do a quick credit report review, reference guide, and we will be taking a short practice quiz to go over the information you learned today. So let's get started. It's a lot of information. Let's go over underwriting duties. Evaluate the 4 C's of underwriting and credit risk of each loan. You're going to determine whether the loan file meets product and program guidelines. You're going to identify red flags or fraud activities. Issue the loan decision, which could be a credit approval, a suspense, a denial, and a clear to close at the end of the underwriting review. You are to try to meet your production expectations for reviews of new loans and clearing conditions. I'm going to touch bases on that last line, meet production expectations. Most lenders out there don't really have a formal, you have to underwrite X amount of loans on a per day basis, only because every file is different. You might get one really, really hard file that could take you all day. An example of underwriting a file that has maybe 10 business returns and a COBAR that has a W-2 worker. Those are going to take times to really deep dive and make sure that your income is correct. All the docs that you're going to need for those businesses are in the file, or you condition properly. So something like that, you might only underwrite 1 a day, or you might be able to underwrite 2 to 3. So it's really talking to your manager. There is some type of expectations, but there's no, you have to do these, or you're going to, if you don't do 5 a day, something's going to happen to you. Talk to your manager, talk to your employer, and know where you are need to be when you're underwriting these files. Underwriting responsibilities. Continue on. So you have to meet industry standards for loan quality. What is loan quality? Refers to accuracy of the verified data within the underwriting decision compared to the data reflected in the documentation provided by the borrower. Meeting rush requests deadlines as approved by management. If you ever took any classes from me before, all about making sure we do our due diligence as an underwriter, as a processor, as a loan originator. Our jobs are to make sure our information is accurate. Loan quality is one of the ones that refers to accuracy, making sure that we are reviewing every file carefully and making the correct decisions based on the information we have. And sometimes you're going to need more information, and that's okay. You're going to condition for them, and you're going to get those docs, and you're going to make a more exact decision on approving, declining, suspending, or clear to close. Meeting rush requests for deadlines. Typically, you'll have a lot of those on purchases because you have a deadline of when the seller needs to sell the house, and in the contract there's a deadline for a commitment being issued and a deadline for the sales contract to be totally, not sales contract, but the purchase to be totally completed and out of the ownership of the seller and into the ownership of the buyer. Provide customer service to internal employees such as loan officers, loan processors, managers, closers, quality control, close Post-closing, secondary marketing. Underwriters must provide timely response to emails, phone calls from these internal customers. Internal customers are the ones that we just went over. It's very important. I know a lot of underwriters get overwhelmed working on a file and can't pick up their phone when they're underwriting because they don't want to lose their thought process, their chain of working on the loan. But it is important if something like that happens, you're in the middle of income calculation, you can't pick up that phone call because let's say someone's calling you. As soon as you finish that, do return your phone calls. It's important. It shows good customer service as underwriters. And sometimes the LOs will get really nervous if you're not picking up the phone call, thinking that you're going to decline the file when it's really you just need time to work. And they might call their managers, and their manager might call your underwriting managers. It gets into a big issue if you're not returning phone calls at a timely manner. And again, it could be, if you can't talk, shoot an email. Hey, I just saw your call. I'm working on something. I'll give you a call right back. If you're a better calling someone, give them a call. My experience in today's environment, always do a paper trail sometimes in responses. So email would be preferred and a phone call. Underwriter skill set. It's basically the ability to evaluate automated underwriting systems, findings, reports, research products, and program guidelines to ensure each loan scenario is acceptable. Ability to identify adverse credit events and determine acceptable seasoning and rebuilding of credit. Ability to calculate wage earning, fixed income, rental, and self-employment income. Ability to evaluate deposits, investments, retirement accounts, cash to close and reserves. The ability to review the appraisal and the forms to determine what's the market value, what's the subject's property's condition, is it acceptable. The ability to verify data through the loan originating system and automated underwriting system, which is short, the AUS system. These are all the systems and all the skill sets that we need as an underwriter to really do our job accurate and do a really good job. You want to make sure you are reading the guidelines and understanding and interpreting them the right way. You don't want to have a discrepancy on what something is really clearing, saying in a DU or LP findings, and you're interpreting something different, and then you might get a challenge, and it's okay. It's okay to get challenged from a loan officer, maybe a processor, or maybe a supervisor of some sort, and say, hey, you are conditioning for 2 months bank statements, but the DU, the LP, AUS is only asking for 1 bank statement. Why we're asking this? And it might be just a simple answer that they don't know because they're just looking off the automated underwriting system that is required, that you found based on looking at a credit report, their income, or just a guideline that maybe it's not being reflected on the AUS. You want to make sure you have that ability to find those and understand what you're underwriting, what you're reading, and you can communicate that properly with the necessary people. So it's always important to follow up on your guidelines, understand what you're looking at, and sometimes if there's something that you don't know, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask another coworker or ask your supervisor. Sometimes at the companies that you might be working for, there is an internal help desk even for underwriters on how to interpret a guideline or a funky scenario that you're not familiar with or you don't feel comfortable, that maybe someone else could explain how to underwrite the file and makes you feel more comfortable so you could underwrite it. The underwriting authorities. Underwriting authority is the credit decision that is granted to the underwriter by the employer. Now, there's different types of certificates, credit decision that's allowed. Let's just go over a little bit of what they are. training program certificates. It's usually the first time you start any job. There's usually a training period, either a week, it could be 2 days, whatever it is, they'll let you know. And it's basically learning on how they do their loan processing, how they do their underwriting. So you get an understanding of how you should do your daily workflow. And at the end of those times, there are exams to certify you that you are comfortable, or they feel comfortable that you are okay to underwrite their files. There are other endorsements that are a little bit more restrictive, or it's harder to get. One of the two main certifications that almost everyone in this industry kind of want nowadays, but it's hard to get, is your FHA direct endorsement and your VA credit underwriting, which is a LAP, a SAR for VA. And FHA is a CHUMS ID number. And FHA is just basically it's a certification, and it allows the underwriters to underwrite FHA loans. And the same thing with VA. It lets the underwriter to underwrite VA loans. If you don't have those certificates, either for FHA or VA, you can't underwrite them. So you're restricted to doing conventional loans. So it could be a normal loan, it could be a jumbo loan, or it could be a non-QM in today's environment. Those are loans that you have delegate underwriting privileges. But when it comes to FHA, VA, you need to get certified, and it's a whole process. So hopefully one day you guys will get to that, or maybe you're in there right now, or maybe you do have one of those licensing to do those type of loan programs. So this slide kind of just talked about exactly what we just went over. I'm going to touch bases on the last bullet point. If you don't feel the loan is supportive, do not use your authority's signature to approve a loan. Seek a second opinion or a signature from a senior underwriter or management. So in any loans you do, you want to make sure you feel comfortable in approving a loan. If you underwrite a file and you don't think that this loan should be, approved, the borrower can't afford it, or something looks fraud on the account and you need more information, and the borrower is not providing that information to make you feel comfortable about approving a loan, talk to your supervisor, talk it out, see if you are correct, or maybe you are not seeing something that your supervisor will see. So, and if you don't feel comfortable, if you have your FHA license or your VA license, those are your license. So if the loan does go default, something goes wrong with it, your name's attached to the file. You made a decision, and sometimes they could come back and say you made a bad decision. So you need to make sure you understand the file, that when your name is on it, it's golden. That, based on your review, they should be able to repay back the loan if it's all criteria, all the guidelines. So just keep that in the back of your head. Underwriting tools. So the tools as an underwriter, we have underwriting guidelines. Okay. Our company, the agency or the investor memos and policy and procedure updates that we get from the investors sometimes. Underwriting worksheets, income calculation worksheets, wage earner income, rental income, self-employment, tax returns, loan file notifications and write-ups. These are all things that we'll need in working on a file. I'm going to show you briefly what is one of the tools, which is the income calculation. All right, this is actually an income worksheet. Every company has a different income worksheet. I've seen it. Companies kind of use the standard Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac worksheets. Some of them create their own. This is an example only. Don't look saying, all right, my job doesn't have this exact one. Should I be telling them to get this exact one? Every company is different. I've created my own over the past, years. You got to feel comfortable on the tools that they're giving you. So it's sometimes if they give you a calculator that you're not familiar with it, just got to get familiar, practice on it, get used to how does it work. Typically, you have to put your underwriting name, your date of when you're reviewing the file, loan number, borrower's name, and then it goes into, okay, what type of income is Social Security income? What is he getting on a monthly basis? Pension, child support, and it does it from one borrower, two borrowers. Some of these calculators just have one borrower section. Some of them have two borrower sections. And then it'll tell you on the hourly, they'll help you calculate it based on your hourly wage, your salary, your biweekly, checks year to date, see if you're on track, does salary employees. It does anyone that is getting bonus, overtime. These are all used to calculate everything. Okay. And again, every job has their own setup. So just stay tuned and see what your job provides. And if they don't provide any of them, you feel free to go always on to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac guidelines. On their site, they do have income calculation worksheets, and you could utilize those. All right, so let's go over the agency guidelines. What are guidelines again? Guidelines are the tools that we have to help us underwrite a file. Now, every lender, every type of program has their own guidelines. So I'm just going over the different agency guidelines. But if you're selling into a particular investor, you have to check, see if there's any investor overlays on top of these guidelines. So one of the overlays could be Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac ask for 2 months bank statements, 1 month bank statement, but the investor needs 2 months. That's an overlay. It doesn't mean that you're wrong in the sense that it needs 1 month bank statement, but the investor, your lender, your company is selling it to requires 2. So you do have to check everything. You have to check the agency guidelines and your investor sometimes that you're selling it to. So you have a Fannie Mae website that has their seller guides. You have Freddie Mac's site that has their guidelines. You also have the USDA, FHA, and VA. There is a link on this presentation at the end that gives you the sites for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, and VA, where to get those handbooks. Okay, let's go over automated versus manual. Now, what does that mean? Well, automated, I'm talking about, is automated underwriting versus underwriting a manual system. So, manual system is us. We are in a manual system. We're physically reviewing the file and making a decision manually. Where an automated system will take all the information you inputted into the system, your credit report, your income figures, your asset figures, the social security numbers, you input the address, the purchase price, the loan amount, the refi, the cash out, the debts being paid off, all that runs into an automated system, which is DU or LP, and it tells you what's the decision. It tells you if it's approved, ineligible, it's referred. Sometimes it tells you manual. So you want to make sure that it's going to tell you the right amount of what's going to go on. So sometimes you do have to make it a manual underwrite. And you do have to look up the guidelines and see if it meets the individual guideline components of that loan program so you could be able to sell it to your investor. Okay. There's a note on the bottom. It's very important. Manual underwrite is usually reserved for borrowers with limited or no credit, bankruptcies, chapters 13, or inaccurate data showing up on the credit profiles. Most lenders that I've worked at don't do manual underwrites when it comes to conventional loans. So that's your Fannie and Freddie products. And even sometimes they don't like to do it at all, even on FHA. But in today's environment, I've come across more lenders that are willing to do manual underwrites for FHA loans, but again, still not for conventional. So check with your company, check with your lender, if they do it or if they don't do it, and go from there. Okay. This is just a little template that kind of breaks down everything that we kind of just went over. Fannie Mae is the DU, Freddie Mac's LPA, USD is GUS, GUS, FHA is total scorecard, but you run it through DU or LPA systems to get your findings. And then sometimes you have particular programs like non-QMs, and they might want you to run a findings just to give you a mini review of the file and determine what DU would or LP would approve the loan, and then underwrite it manually after that. So check with your company to see what programs and what systems they like to use. Sometimes some lenders will only use DU for their conventional loans and not LPA. Some do both. Some only use LPA also. So just double check. The AUS findings, these are the credit risk factors that come into play when they're approving the loan. Check for eligibility is credit history. Okay. Delinquencies on credit, mortgage accounts and foreclosures, revolving credit, meaning how much credit are they almost maxed out on that credit card, or they're close to it? Why are they close to it? Those are the factors that come into credit. Public records, collections, and then of course inquiries. If you are running your credit 5 times a week for a past month, and you're running them for credit cards, and they see that, your scores sometimes will decrease, and it really depends on the credit bureaus on how they factor that in. But it kind of looks like you're needy because you're running it every single day for the past couple of weeks, that you need money, and that they tend to negatively give you a bad credit score or a lower credit score than normal because of those, because they're afraid of you. Something is going on in your life and you need money now, and they want to make sure you pay it and you're a strong credit person. The eligibility factors are LTV, CLTV, HCLTV. Those are all your LTV qualifications. Your liquid reserves, how much cash the borrower has in the bank account or in their retirement accounts or some type of savings. Loan purpose, why are they doing this loan? If someone refinanced a week ago, why are they refinancing again? Does that make sense to the borrower? It might make sense to the bank and lender because they're making money, but is it making sense for the lender or for the borrower? And really, the lenders out there are out there to hurt the borrowers. If they see that happen, there is an internal review process to see if it's worthwhile doing a loan based on the borrower just refinance. It has to be a benefit to the borrower for as a bank and a lender to do the loan. Your loan term and amortization. If someone is going from a 30-year to a 15-year, or someone's going from a 15-year to a 30-year, why is that? What's the thought process? You might need an LOE for something like that. Your total expense ratios, that comes into your debt to income ratio. Your property type, are you refinancing a unique property? Are you refinancing a commercial loan on a conventional? Is that allowed? Is that not allowed? And co-borrowers, who is this co-borrower? Is the co-borrower really living there? Is the co-borrower a family member? Are the co-borrowers husband and wife, friends, partners? Those are all, come into play when they do eligibility factors. So let's go over the DU recommendations. It's pretty straightforward. It's the approve. The approve indicates the loan satisfies the Fannie Mae's credit risk standards. The eligible indicates the loan satisfies Fannie Mae loan eligibility. So you usually have approve, eligible. That's what you want when the loan is submitted through your DU findings, because that means it's good to go. Make sure everything fits the criteria, follow the conditions on the DU findings, and then you should be good to go to close on your loan. Refer eligible. Refer eligible means the loan is eligible but for manual underwrite, typically you have to do. And depending on the company and the lender you work for, on a conventional loan, if they're willing to do a manual underwrite, you'll see a lot of those also on FHA. If you're working on an FHA loan and you're a DE underwriter and the company does do manual underwrites, that's your go ahead to actually take that loan to the next level and manually underwrite the file with the conditions accordingly. The next one is ineligible, and that indicates the loan does not satisfy Fannie Mae's eligibility. And that means maybe something was inputted wrong. Maybe something is not picking up properly. That's where, again, it's our job to make sure everything is correct, look at the findings, see what's making it not eligible, and go from there. Refer with caution indicates the loan does not meet credit risk or loan eligibility standards and is ineligible for delivery to Fannie Mae guidelines. So refer/caution, typically those are the ones that some people out there that might do like manual underwrites, even for ineligible. If something's not picking up properly and you need to do manual underwriting, that's something that, again, that's based on your current employer if they're willing to do that. And then the other one is out of scope. I don't usually come across too many of those when I do my findings, but sometimes you do. And that just indicates DU is unable to underwrite the loan file as submitted. All right, then you have LP findings. It's very similar to DU, just the wording and it's really the wording that they're using. Instead of approve eligible, it's accept. So an accept indicates the loan meets Fannie Mae guidelines and credit risk standards. Streamline accept, that just reduces the documentation. It meets the loans guidelines and credit risk, but it's eligible for a reduced documentation. So sometimes those might be an appraisal waiver. It might be one bank statement instead of two bank statements. It might be one pay stub instead of 4 pay stubs if they're on a weekly basis. Read your guidelines and see what are they streamlining, because they'll tell you what's the streamlining qualifications and what are their guidelines. Then you have the standard, which is basically tells them that the documentation meets Fannie Mae's eligible and you're basically good to go. Okay. Then you have the caution. That's the red flag. That's when it comes into again, that's the manual of LPs. Again, a lot of people don't do it, but it's a good thing to say, let's make sure the information we inputted into the system is correct and accurate, and we'll go from there. So caution indicates the loan is unlikely to meet Fannie Mae's, Freddie Mac's eligibility requirements due to something wrong, the risk layers. The next one is ineligible, incomplete, or invalid. And that's LP is unable to underwrite the file the way it's submitted. And again, check your data that you're putting in there. Check the findings. LP, I've noticed LP is a little bit harder when you're using your loan processing system or underwriting system. Most companies out there use a system called Encompass. And I know when I use Encompass, if you don't input the right fields, when it transfer over to LP, you do get an error message, and sometimes it's coming out inaccurate findings until you correct them, and then you get the either approve or ineligible. So let's go to the next slide. Data integrity of AUS limitations. So it goes back to what I was just talking about. Data integrity, this refers to the accuracy of the data inputted into the AUS. If data is inputted inaccurate, the feedback will be inaccurate. You won't get the right findings. And AUS limitations. With any computer, AI, I know there's a lot of AIs on different phones. I've used them. They're not always accurate. Every AI will give you a different answer sometimes. And it's based on the information that us input into the system. That's why it's different answers. So if you are not inputting it the right way, it won't read properly. So one of the ones, it can't read a credit report because it's just going to take the factual data and won't interpretate sometimes on the lates. It'll tell you late. It'll tell you, hey, you're late, and that's it. You can't do it no more. But there might be a reason why they're late that you could work, and there's a guideline that says there's a reason why you're late, and it's okay. There's a reason as long as it makes sense. So those are the things that it's not going to pick up. So you definitely have to make sure everything is correct. There's an example on this slide. If the pay stubs show a child support, it's not going to be included into your ratios unless you, as an underwriter, processor, loan originator, input that information on your loan system. So it can't pick it up, and your ratios are going to be out of whack. All right, forms 1003 and 1008. All right. A 1003 is basically your loan application that gives you all your loan data, tells you who's the borrower, tells you the address, your social security number, date of birth, their job information, their income is listed, any real estate owned, tells you loan details on your purchase price, your appraised value, what type of home it is. It lists everything, credit, assets it'll do. So that's your main go-to when you're underwriting a file, because that tells you everything. And you also, once you underwrite a file, you also have to update the information of what you're reviewing to match the system. So whatever you pay, if you get 4 pay stubs and you calculate income lower than what's in your 1003, well, you have to correct the 1003 and show the new income that's being used. And then, of course, you have to rerun it through your AUS to make sure you still get approval. So anytime you change something in 1003, for the good or for the worse, make sure you run your AUS so you get the accurate approval status of the loan. And a 1008 is basically kind of like an internal, I always use it as an internal note system for underwriting support, because it really tells you a short version of your details of this transaction. And there's a section in there for notes for the underwriters to put on how we calculate income. Did we use this? Did we use overtime? Did we not use overtime? Anything funky on the loan, we want to put it in there because someone after us as an underwriter will review your file. It could be the lender that they take it in. It could be QC. And if there's something that you did that's out of the box, needs to be noted somewhere. So the next person to pick up the file could understand why you underwrote, how you came up your income. It's very important to make sure it matches. Okay. So this slide just basically tells you what I just told you. It has all the details. It tells you your PITI, your DTI, your LTV, your credit approval status. What system? Are you doing a manual underwrite? If you're doing an AUS, income calculation should be on there. Your notes on the appraisal review, or again, anything you see on the credit, it should be on here, and it's important. All right, so let's go over the handouts now within this presentation. There should be 3 handouts for the 1003. One is the newest version that will be implemented in 2018. And the other one is the old version, which some companies are still utilizing. Let's go over the old one, and we'll go through it as quick as possible, and we'll get into the new one also. First off, the Section 1 tells you the information on what type of loan you're working on. If it's a VA, FHA, what's your loan amount, interest rate, number of months of the term, and the amortization type. Part 2 will tell you all the property information and purpose of the loan. So it gives you the subject property address. Make sure it matches what you're currently working on. So if you're working on a purchase, make sure it matches your contract of sale. If you're working on a refi, make sure it matches your driver's license. Refi as a primary residence, of course. Make sure it matches the driver's license or your supporting docs in the file. You'll go over the purpose of the loan, to purchase or refi. What type of property will it be, primary or second, or even an investment property. Tells you how the property will be held and the sourcing of the down payment that the borrower is going to be utilizing to do this transaction. Part 3 is the borrower's information, and that's going to tell you everything that the borrower is personal. Your borrower's name, social security number, home number, date of birth, school, marriage, property address that they currently live in, and you have to have 2-year history of where they have lived it within the last 2 years. And if you have a spouse, they do have to be on the same application. Make sure if you have 2 borrowers and it's marked married for each borrower that they're not truly married with each other, because then you need them to have it on only one application. And if they're not married to each other, then yes, 2 applications is just fine. Then you have section 4, employment information. You do have to put 2-year employment information for the borrowers. If they don't, then you have to, get explanations on why they don't have a 2-year history and see if it qualifies under the guidelines that you're working on. Section 5, which is the monthly income and housing expense ratio. This is where you get your information on what the loan officer put down. But again, we are working on the final 1003. So we're going to put down our numbers, our calculations for income, for the current taxes, present taxes, proposed taxes, anything that we are changing and touching in the file. We want to make sure that's accurate and it's the final numbers. The next section is section 6, assets and liabilities. All your assets would be listed on your left-hand side. All the liabilities are on the right side, and the liabilities will come from the credit report. You will probably pull your credit report from the loan system you are processing and underwriting in, and then you just have to make sure everything gets imported properly from the credit bureau. And the biggest mistake I always see, and I'm just pointing it out now, is the auto loans. Auto loans, you want to make sure that it comes in as installment or lease. Most of the time they come in just as installment, or the loan officer puts only installment, and it's really a lease. And if someone is trying to exclude something because it's less than 10 payments on that auto loan or lease, you want to make sure that you could exclude. On a lease, you can't exclude if it's 1 payment left. But if you have 10 payments or less on a installment loan, auto loan, then you could exclude it. So make sure everything is correctly in there. If something that the borrower has is not on the credit report, you do have to manually input it into your system so it can show up on the 1003. Okay. The next page continues on with the asset liabilities. Over here in blue, it has the real estate owned section. So if the borrower currently owns properties, you want to make sure that's completely filled out and accurate. Okay. The declarations for 7 and 8, make sure that they're all accurate and completely filled out. If something is missing in the declaration page, make sure your loan officer or your processor gets that information from the borrower correctly. The last one is acknowledgement and agreement. That basically tells us and lets the borrowers know that they're signing. Everything has to be truthfully and accurately given to the loan officer, and the information is correct on the 1003, and it gives us permission to start working on the loan for them. So make sure that it's signed and dated, and if it's not, find out from your management on why you're working on it. And the simple thing might be you're working on a pre-approval and they want you to be really thorough on the approval status on that. The next part is the government information and monitoring purposes. I'm going to not go into full detail with it because the part 2 of the old 1003 is really that. And some systems have it broken down, or some system has exactly what's listed here. And then you have your loan officer signing it, and then all their information is there. You want to make sure that that information is correct and accurate also. So let's go to the part 2, which is the demographic information. So this section is also the same part of the old 1003. Tells you the ethnic and sexual of the borrower, and it will also tell you how the application was taken. It was taken by mail, person, phone call. So this has to be filled out also. So let's go into the new 1003, which is right here, and it's basically the same information, just different way of formatting it. Every time changes like this happen, usually are done because they want to make sure the borrower understands what they're filling out, make sure what the information they're giving is accurate and proper in their loan situation. So go through this, see exactly what you have questions. I'm going to go over it briefly. Section 1 is the borrower's information. Again, anything that's related to the borrower's personal information, name, social security number, address, prior address, military status, language spoken. The next thing, income sources on 1E. Part 2 is the assets and bank account information, liabilities too. Okay, scroll down. Part 3 is this financial information on real estate, so any real estate that they own has to be listed there. Okay. Part 4 is the loan and property information. So where this was in up top, where on the old 1003, now it's it's in page 5 of the new 1003. Okay, so all the property details of the loan that we're trying to do, any gifts or anything for the down payment, and then you have the declarations. Okay, and then these are instructions from 7 to 8, just basic instructions on how to do the 1003. The next part that we're going to go into is the 1008. Now, the 1008 is basically the underwriter's loan summary of the loan transaction. There is a new version of the 1008 that's being implemented. Again, it has to be utilized. It's coming up. Some people are already using it. So it depends on the company. I'm showing you both versions, but again, they're identically the same, just a different format. So on your 1008, it has all your information that's taken from your 1003. On here, borrowers and property information, mortgage type, underwriting information. This is where it becomes more in depth as us as underwriters, because this is where we put information on how we underwrote the loan. Every loan gets sold down the road, or it goes some type of QC, and the person who looks at the loan after us needs to know, how did we come up with the income? Why did we underwrite the loan the way we did? And this is where you put it in. It tells you if it's a DU, LP, AUS, or it's a manual, and the rating that they provided us, if it's approved eligible. The underwriting comment section, that's where we put in our thoughts behind this file. So I'm just going to read this simple thought process on this file. Underwriter, UW is underwriting, verified the child support income with a copy of the divorce decree and a bank statement showing direct deposits. Self-employment income, see income worksheet. So you want to tell them, okay, this is the thought process why we're using divorce income. This is how we're using divorce income. And self-employment income, go see my worksheet. It's really thorough. It explains everything there. We do have to sign it down below if it's a manual underwriting. Typically on a regular AUS, some lenders, some bankers do want all of us to sign it no matter what. But if it's an AUS approval, it just states that if it's a Fannie Mae manual underwrite or some type of manual underwriting for FHA or VA, we have to make sure we sign everything. The new 1008, again, has exactly the same borrower's information, mortgage information, underwriting information. Okay, scroll down. It has the same underwriting comments, but for some reason it's formatted differently. And the new version, both of the new versions look great. It's just we have to get used to it, especially the veterans out there. Okay. Let's go over the next handout, which is the DU findings. Everything in black has been redacted to keep the confidentiality of the file that we are using. The DU findings will show you approve eligible, so it's recommendation. Tells you the borrower's name, the loan number that the system provides you, the date of submission, and how many times did you submit it through the AOS. Now, the more times you submit it, if you submitted this 30 times, you probably will get a red flag saying you excessively submitted the approval, and there's probably an extra step that you have to do to get it approved. So try to limit your submissions as little as possible. But again, you want to make sure that you do your due diligence in making sure the loan qualifies. Does the information for the mortgage, okay, tells you the risk eligibility. And here, right here, the risk eligibility tells you the stuff that you have to really condition for, okay. So scroll down, the findings. Right here, it tells you when your credit report expires. It tells you, and you might have an old credit report. It might say, hey, that expired already. You got to get a new one. And that happens. You might have a file that's been sitting on your desk for a long time and expires, and you need a new one. Credit liabilities. So all your 30-day accounts, anything you're excluding will be listed here, and it'll ask you why you're excluding. So you have to get documentation for that or explanation. Okay. Employment information. This is where it tells you if you need multiple pay stubs, if you need 1 year pay stub, 1 year tax returns. All this would tell you, and this helps you condition your file. But again, your lender might have overlays on top of your DU findings, so make sure you underwrite the right way. Okay, assets the same way. Tells you how much assets you need. Tells you how many months of sourcing you need to do that. If it's a 30-day statement, 2-month statement, as you see here, this one has 2 months period. So it tells you everything. It tells you the appraisal, if it needs appraisal waiver, and then it tells you the credit. Make sure the credit report is accurate. The date is on there. The borrower's information, social security number, the credit scores are correct. Again, we're inputting everything manually. We want to make sure everything is accurate because we could make human error. And then if we do that, the DU findings or LP findings will be totally wrong, and we're not underwriting the correct way. Okay. The underwriting analysis tells you like a synopsis of everything that went on the file. So it's all the numbers, kind of like a 1008. And that's it. Let's go over the LP. All right, the LP, this is an example. Great thing about Freddie Mac, they have directly an example on their site. So if you go to freddiemac.com, you could get this directly, but we are giving you as a handout on what the whole LP looks like and what does it mean. So it has the same similarity. I'm going to try to zoom this a little bit more so you can see it, because it's a little blurry when you're far away. But it tells you if the loan is eligible, what's the risk class, acceptable, and the collateral if it's eligible. Now, the blurriness are the borrower's names. This for confidentiality. Freddie Mac has blurred them out directly, which is great. And it tells you the results. And the same thing as the DU findings. It tells you the loan data. It tells you where everything is coming from. It tells you the results. Tells you the credit scores, tell you what score they're using, what middle FICO score they're using out of the 3. So basically, it tells you everything you need to know when you underwrote the loan, what you inputted in there, and what they are picking it up, and what's the results, what conditions they're asking, and make sure that it meets your expectations of what your company guidelines for conditioning also. Okay. Remember, DU is what the bare, and LP is the bare minimum of what conditions are supposed to be. But as other investors and overlays might ask for additional documentation for their loans. Okay, it tells you what LTV, tells you the borrower's information, which is, it's great. It tells you the DTI. And all this is on the DU findings also. Okay. All right, feedbacks. Tells you the status, and here, right here, it tells you the employment information, income, assets, credit liabilities, property appraisal reports, general messages. This is, it helps you with your conditioning of the files and making sure you're doing the right thing on your file. But again, DU and LP, we want to make sure the information we inputted there is correct and accurate. If it's not, we have to correct it. Okay, so these are whatever the findings you have, you make sure it matches your 1003 and everything is reading properly. What I've noticed on DU and LP, you might have your ratios are wrong in your loan processing system compared to your findings from the AOS, and you got to figure out why is it pulling that way and correct it in their system. DU has another format, a newer version of the format. They all are coming up with the different versions of what looks better and what's appealing to the loan originators and underwriters and processors to help our job to do it easier and better. Okay, so let's continue on with the presentation. So let's go over briefly the credit report review and the sections on the credit report that we should really focus on. And that's the application information, the borrower's name, date of birth, social security number, address history, and employment history. We want to make sure that when we run the credit report that the information is accurate, that it matches. Looking for a form, don't only take the word. If you're, working with the loan originator says, I took the word of the borrower, or I misheard his social security number. I didn't hit his twos sounded like eights. Well, we have information. We should have information to verify the information that they're giving us. And one of that information is the social security card. Okay. So we want to make sure that matches up with the data that we're inputting. So, and the borrower's name, another source would be the social security card or the borrower's driver's license, which typically that's what we need as documentation for the loan, and we can match it up. All right, the date of birth would be on the driver's license, address history. You won't really know that unless they give it to us, but you will know the address listed on the driver's license, and that's what we're going to do. And if it doesn't match up to what they have used or put on the 1003, then that's an issue, and we have to question that. Okay. The next one is credit summary. So it's going to be the trade line mix and payment history. So we're going to figure out what is the payments on the borrower's credit history. And then we're going to look at the individual trade line payment history, includes a list of collections and charge-offs. We're going to look at public records for bankruptcies and judgments. We're also going to look at who's been running their credit. Is it, are we, or as us as lenders, are the only one running his credit? Or, hey, he just ran 10 inquiries. He or she ran 10 inquiries for a car loan, but it's not showing up on their credit report. Something to question. Like, maybe the borrower got a new car, and you got a question and say, hey, we saw on your credit report 10 inquiries from a whole bunch of different car companies. Did you acquire a new loan for a car? And they would say yes or no. And again, it depends on your level of your company. You might need to get further clarification besides an LOE. If they did do a new car, then you do have to get information about that loan. You need the loan terms, you need the payment, and then you need to calculate that into your ratios. And then we look for any fraud alerts. Sometimes the borrower might put on a fraud holding, and that would basically, you would know if they would do it because sometimes the credit agencies won't run a score. And I'll tell you, can't run it. There's a hold on one of the credit bureaus. Please contact the credit company to release the hold. And they do that because the borrower maybe had a fraud done on them in the past and they don't want to do it anymore. So every time a new credit or something is pulled, they want to be alerted right away with that. The credit report review, we always have to check on the middle, or people call it the mid FICO score, and that's used to qualify the borrower. So you'll have 3 credit bureaus. You'll have a tri-merge credit report, and that's from Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, and that tells you everything about the borrower, and you will know what's the credit scores. And if they only have 2, you're going to take the lower out of the 2 But if you have 3, you're going to not take the lowest, you're not going to take the highest, you're going to take the middle one of the two. So when it says middle or mid FICO score used, so if you have a 750, a 780, and you have a 600, the middle one is not the 780. That's the highest one. You're going to take the first one. So you really just have to type them up on a paper or visually imagine, and do the order, stacking on highest to lowest, and then you choose the middle. Okay? And then if you have multiple bars, a first bar and a co-bar, they're going to take the lower of the 2 mid FICO scores. So you have bar A with a 700 FICO score and a bar B, which is a co-bar, and it's a 620. You're going to automatically use the 620 FICO score for qualifying purposes. Okay, I'm going to go over in one of the handouts. There is a copy of an example credit report. So let's review that shortly. All right, like I said, this is a sample of a credit report, and it should be in the handouts section. And again, this just kind of solidifies everything I just went over on this credit report. It'll tell you the borrower's names. This is a sample, so it says sample Steve, sample Sharon. It tells you the current address, the previous address. If they own or rent, that's good to know. Not everyone will have an accurate information sometimes on this. It does have the social security number, so hey, look at the social security number. It's kind of weird. 333-22-1111. If you come across that, you might want to check. Did someone type it in wrong? Let me check the credit, the social security card. Tells you the date of birth. Make sure everything is accurate on the 1003 also. Tells you if there's any fraud, any activities. This bar actually only has a couple of FICO scores are not showing up, and it's, if they're not showing up, it says not provided by the credit bureau. Basically, that's saying, and that's gonna go into the rule is that you're gonna have to take the lower of the 2. If you don't have 2, there are guidelines, particular going over what do you do when a borrower only has 1 FICO score. So check your guidelines, check your overlays. Sometimes your company might not even do that because that's an overlay factor. So double check. This goes over to credit history. I'm going to scroll down because it does tell you late, and this is important. Derogatory items tells you what's late. Oh, this Bank of America mortgage is late. Okay, it's a mortgage. How long is it late? Past, how many past days has been? It's only been a lot, 30 days, 30 days. It's been 160 day late, but the good thing is never been more than 90 days late, and that's really a strong positive thing. But it does tell you when was the last late, and these are all things that, yes, your AUS might pick up, but it's also our job to check the guidelines to see, okay, on a mortgage, when can a borrower be 30 days late and it's okay? How long apart? Some of the guidelines says, hey, you can't be more than, have 1 late within a year of the mortgage application. And if you have 5 lates, then you're not going to qualify. So these are the credit report. If you scroll all the way down, it does a credit history again, more lates, tells you the information that's here, what's pulled, date of birth, inquiries, all the inquiries that's done, addresses, information, AKAs. So these are all things we do have to go over and verify. All right, guys and girls, we just went over the credit report. Let's go over a little practice exercise. So here we got a borrower and a co-borrower. It has 3 FICO scores for each borrower. Let's ask some questions. First question is, what is the borrower's mid FICO score? The borrower's. I hope you all said 684. So 684 is the mid FICO score. What is the co-borrower's FICO score? mid FICO score, 745. Now, what are you going to use to qualify? I hope you all get this one correct, and it is 684. And the reason why you get that, I'm going to take out my pen. We don't take the higher one. We take the lower of the two. And that would be this one. Okay. Let's go on. As I promised earlier, this is a reference guide section. It tells you where to find your guidelines. It tells you to find your Freddie Mac, your Fannie Mae. If you want to learn more information about FHA or VA, it's all here. It's a great opportunity to get some learning. Some companies, and most companies, do have a site called AllRegs. It is a paid site for basically lenders to put up there all their guidelines. It's an investors, lenders like this, and we go there all into one place to find what we're looking for. So if we're looking for an investor, particular Fannie Mae program, see if there's any overlays, you go to that site instead of going to the investor directly. And Fannie Mae, so you would have to go to two sites. There you just go on one site, get all the information needed. But check with your employer, see if you have access to that, and if you do, fool around with it, get comfortable with it. A lot of people I know have a hard time navigating it because they just don't practice enough on it. All right, like I also said, practice quiz, guys. Let's go into the quiz. Question number 1. True or false? Underwriters only provide updates on the loan to the borrower and the loan officer. And our answer is false. There's a lot more people that we provide updates on, which it would be the borrower, the loan officer, the processors, maybe a processor assistant, your managers. It's a lot more than just the borrower itself and the loan officer. Question 2. For an underwriter to work on an FHA loan, what must he or she have? Now, if you say a computer, you might be right, but there's something else I'm asking. And the answer is an endorsement. An FHA endorsement, which is your DE, and you'll have a particular, it's called a CHUMS number, that gives you permission to work on these type of loans. Question 3, true or false? Working on a Fannie Mae loan, the AUS will be LP. Now, we went over the handouts on the different types of AUSs, and we did go over a lot of slides that went into detail on the type of approval statuses on the AUSs. So hopefully you get this one right. The answer is false. If you're doing a Fannie Mae loan, your AUS will be DU. Question 4. A blank DU recommendation indicates the loan does not satisfy Fannie Mae loan eligibility. What's the answer? The answer is ineligible. An ineligible DU recommendation indicates the loan does not satisfy Fannie Mae loan eligibility criteria. Question 5. Form blank summarizes the loan characteristics that determine the loan decision. The form blank. I could think of 2 forms right now that could be that. So hopefully you got that form correct. It's the 1008. Now the 2 forms that we're saying, technically it could be, you might think it's the 1003, but the 1003 just summarizes the information. The loan characteristics are more geared towards the 1008. Question 6. Which FICO score would you use to qualify the loan? So we have 3 credit scores for each borrower, and there's 2 borrowers. So there's really two calculations you're going to be doing to find out the answer. And I'll explain that shortly. So hopefully you got the right answer, and the answer is 684. So you're basically going to do one calculation to determine the middle FICO score of each borrower, the co-borrower and the borrower. And then you're going to take the calculation of which one of the two mid FICO scores is the lower one. And that's your answer. Question 7. Which FICO score would you use if the borrower only has 2 on the credit report? So in this case, we only have one borrower and he only has 2 FICO scores. What would you use? And the answer would be the lowest FICO score of the 2. Question 8. What section of the credit report provides address history? Okay, we just went over the example of the credit report, but also in the slides previously, we talked about this. Hopefully you got this one right also. It's the application information. And again, we always want to make sure that the information is accurate in our 1003 credit report, our AUS systems. Everything has to be accurate. Question 9. Where on the credit report can you find bankruptcies and judgments? So again, another credit report question. And the answer is on the public records. And this is an important section to know. You want to know if the borrower filed bankruptcy, how long ago, what chapter it is, and any judgments are outstanding, how much they are. These are all factors that determine if the loan will qualify. Question 10, last question. Hopefully you'll get 100 on this one. If you didn't, don't worry. This is again to refresh you and see maybe if you need to go back and look at what you might need for further clarification on. Does the underwriter do their own income calculation worksheet if the loan officer or processor did one already? Okay. And the answer is yes. The underwriter needs to do one. You are the ownership of this file. You are the owner. You make the credit decision. You want to make sure that your numbers are correct and they match up. I've come across so many times that they'll use the income calculation worksheet, the loan officer, or even a processor, and they'll add in overtime, and there's no 2-year history of the overtime. And if you just accept that, now you just have wrong income on your whole file. And this is your file that you are supposed to be working on. It comes down to your due diligence on the file. All right, we're at the end of our presentation. If you have any questions concerning the subject matter that we just went over,